So we do these unbelievable learning programs, and also trips to Israel, trips to Poland, trips to Ukraine, trips to Moscow for college students. And we've noticed that obviously, while limiting education to the computer is challenging, right? The positive side to that is that we have students now. We have 500 kids in our fellowship right now, and they come from all over the world, right? We have students coming in from Brazil, students from Moscow, students from Israel, and they're all coming to be a part of our fellowship on Sundays and Mondays. So that obviously is the positive end of COVID, that we have to we limit our education to online, but we can reach much more people. So this is really nice.
Thank you, Rabbi Delman. So I'm just going to quickly introduce Rabbi Delman. Last week, we were so lucky to hear him share his wild story, how he came from not interested in Judaism to becoming a rabbi, inspiring everybody. He had some extreme stories happen to him in his life. And this week, many people have been hearing about whoever was on the Zoom, they were sharing it, and it was so much fun. And the last thing they showed us is how he went to Poland, and that was also a wild story. So Rabbi Delman, whatever you have to share with us is golden and beautiful, and we appreciate it so much. And we're so looking forward to the topic of the backwards word. Everyone thinks, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? And now we switched it around. Why do good things happen to bad people? So the topic of suffering, we're all going through different things right now. The whole world is going through big challenges. So I want everyone to feel comfortable as he's going to just raise your hand and say, can I ask a question? Because you want everyone to walk away feeling that they got some meat to go home with and spread it to the world, spread the light to everybody. And Rabbi Delman, thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you. And it's a real gift to be able to do this during COVID. So we should all give kavod to Hashem and make Hashem's name great in the world. Thank you, Rabbi Delman.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Chai Sarah, for inviting me a second time. It's a pleasure to meet all the wonderful ladies here. I think we're all ladies, right? No gentlemen. Okay, that's great. That's fine. I actually, if I ever had the choice, I always prefer to teach the ladies over the gentlemen. I think that ladies being the future mothers of the Jewish people, it's really, really important that the education is there and that there's just a very open heart for learning and for growth. So very, very excited to be able to get to know everybody here on the group. I don't want to repeat anything I said last time. So I'll just say that I'm what we call a Baal Tshuva, which means I grew up secular. I became religious later on in life. And to make a very, very long story very, very short, I lived the life of a cultural Jew. And that's why my last class was called The Curse of the Cultural Jew, which meaning that I grew up with all the ideas of what it meant to be Jewish, but I never really did it for me. I always did it because the rabbi made me, because my parents enforced it, because my culture and my community said I had to. But I never really did it for me until I went to Israel, and I had lots of unbelievable things happen to me that I made that very, very big decision to start practicing Judaism for myself, because that's really the only thing that matters, is really, what you believe for yourself versus what other people tell you to. So today, what I said I was going to talk about is why bad things happen to good people, or why good things happen to bad people, whichever way you want to talk about it. But really trying to understand God's suffering. And I said in the last time we met, I said that most people that I meet, and I've been doing Jewish outreach for close to 20 years, most people that I meet do not have a problem with God's existence. Most people that I meet have a problem with God's justice, which is very, very different, right? I mean, there are a lot of logical proofs. There are hundreds of them, actually. I mean, I could just for clarity for right now, I'll say like this. One of the things when we talk about God's existence, I like to look at my watch, right? So here's my watch, right? Right, here's my watch. Not a very particularly nice watch, but it's my watch. I like it. And I would like to say that my watch is made from a place called Invicta. This is an Invicta watch, right? And it was made in a factory where there were maybe 20 or 30 or 40 parts to this watch, and they made it, and they made this watch, right? So would anybody here say that this watch came from nothing, or that there was a creator? There was somebody in a factory that made this watch. So I'm looking at everybody here. We all look as very intelligent individuals, and we would probably all agree that this watch was made by somebody, right? It wasn't just happened. This watch didn't happen into existence. So if this watch only comes from 20 parts, Kal v'chomer in Hebrew, which means even more so, the earth that has billions and trillions and billions, I know I sound like my president here, billions and billions and billions of parts, right, probably also has a creator. If this simple watch has a creator, then for sure a Earth that has trillions of organisms and trillions of whatever also has a creator. So I'm not really here to debate God's existence more than I am here to debate God's justice. And that's what I think it is. If you ask me, was there ever a time in my life that I didn't believe in God? I think if I'm honest, I'll tell you that I always believed in God, but I hated God, right? But in order to hate God, you have to believe that God exists, right? You can't hate nothing, right? So I hated something, right? So that's the idea. So to start, I guess, with the premise that God exists, but if God really exists, if he's not like one of these horrible, horrific gods that we hear about in perhaps other religions, that anytime we sin, he burns us and destroys us, and has, we have to, satiate God, and, whatever it is, these crazy things. So we want to try to have a deeper understanding on God's justice today. Okay, that's what we're going to discuss today. Now, before I even get started, I want to preface this by saying that this is the hardest question of all time, without exception. To understand why bad things happen to good people is the hardest question in the world. I don't like to just make these broad statements. I know this is true. Do you know why? The Torah tells us that King Solomon, who is known as the smartest person who ever existed, had this very same question. And if King Solomon could not figure out why bad things happen to good people, then Rabbi Delman and Chaya Sarah are not going to tell you the answer. It's just that King Solomon was the greatest, right? Even Moses himself, who spoke to God face to face, did not have an answer to this question. Right. So obviously, I'm not going to leave you with nothing. I didn't want to just, make this question and then leave you high and dry. So let's get started. Let's talk about it. Why do bad things happen to good people? And then obviously, I want you guys to stop me, ask me questions, challenge me, and we'll have a really great time. Okay. Here's the first thing I need to say about why bad things happen to good people. Ready? There's no answer. There we go. Now, if I just finished the call right now, you would say, Rabbi, that was the worst lecture I've ever heard. You build it up. You gave me this great title. Chaya Sarah encouraged us to come. All for the rabbi to get up in the class and say there's no answer? What a waste of my time. No, I'm not going to do that to you, right? Obviously, there's no answer, but I'm going to give you something else, okay? What do I mean when I say there is no answer? Okay, let me tell you something beautiful. If you ever wanted to know why the temple in Jerusalem was so special and why we have a holiday called Tisha B'Av, it's actually a sad day, that depicts or talks about the destruction. You say, well, what's the big deal of the temple, right? Now we're going to understand why the temple was so important, and you're going to see how this weaves into why bad things happen to good people. Can you imagine, ladies, a time where I was lost or a person is lost in their life and you needed some clarity in your life, and you had the ability to go to the temple in Jerusalem and talk to God and have God respond to you the way that you and I are talking right now? Imagine if you had that capability. You were lost in life. Should I date this guy? Should I not date this guy? Should I take this job? Should I not take this job? Should I move out west? Should I leave here? Big questions in life. You didn't know what to do. Imagine a place where you could go to speak to God and God would speak back to you. That such place existed. It was called the temple. So how did this happen? Right? How did this happen? There was a man by the name of the Kohen Gadol. He was the high priest. If you ever saw pictures on YouTube of what the high priest would look like, he had these very special robes, these very special garbs. And one amazing piece of his garb or his clothes that he had was something called the Choshen HaMishpat. The Choshen HaMishpat was the famous breastplate, what was known. It was like a square that was on the chest of the high priest right here. And it had 12 stones right across it, representing each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And behind the Choshen HaMishpat, behind the breastplate, was a pocket. And the pocket was known as the Urim V'Tumim. The Urim V'Tumim was a pocket in which, if you ever had a question to speak to God, you would write your question down on a piece of cloth or a piece of parchment. The Kohen Gadol would take your parchment, he would put it behind the breastplate, and then miraculously lights would light up. A special light would shine from the jewels, and the Kohen Gadol was able to decipher, the priest was able to decipher, almost like, if you remember, I'm a child of the 80s. Do you remember the magic 8 balls where you would shake the 8 ball and then like something would come up? You would shake the high priest, You would shake the Kohen and then an answer would pop out, right? But don't shake the priest. He probably wouldn't like it, right? That was the idea. Consider a time where you could literally talk to God and God would answer back. Now, we don't have the temple anymore, right? Unfortunately, the temple is no longer with us. So what does that mean? Is this just like a Western Wall now? Like, what have we actually lost? So what have we really lost? And now, girls, you will know. What did we actually lose when we lost the temple? Here we go. We actually lost the ability to talk to God and for God to answer us back real time. Real time. Real time means I don't have to wait. I don't have to wait 20 years, 30 years after I'm dead to figure out God's plan or God's reasons for doing the things that he does. We lost that ability. So now our relationship with God is still real, but ladies, as you can imagine, it's more distant, right? How many times we go to shul or we go to the synagogue and we pray, but we're not sure. We have doubts. Did God hear? Does God agree? Does he disagree? What's the right thing to do? We have a lot of doubts in our life, right? We all do, myself included, right? So that's the idea. We understanding, ladies? Not since the destruction of the temple can any Jew point to any particular thing in time and say, the reason why this is happening to you, or the reason why this is happening to the Jewish people is because of this, or that, or the other thing. To give a reason. Well, you know why you're suffering? Because you did this. You know why this person's suffering? Because he did this, because she did this. We don't have that ability anymore. We lost that ability. Does that make sense? We lost that ability to go to know real time why bad things happen to good people. Does that make sense so far? Everybody following? Can I get some like head nods? Just make sure people are paying attention. Okay, lovely. Okay, so then what am I don't want to waste your time today. So what am I going to give you? If we don't know really why bad things happen to good people, then what can I give you? So this is what I want to share with you on this lovely afternoon, or maybe evening, depending on where you are. I want to share with you 4 perceptions that the Talmud gives that talks about why bad things may be happening to you. Nobody knows for sure why any specific thing is happening, because again, we don't have the temple, we don't have the high priest, and we don't have the Urim B'Tumim anymore, right? But these are 4 reasons that the Talmud says things may be happening to you. And if one of these 4 things brings you calmness, if it brings you comfort, then wonderful. Then that's what you should do. So what I want to talk to you about today is the 4 possibilities of why bad things may be happening to you. And hopefully one of them will give you comfort. Now, we are all suffering these days because of COVID. We're all either in quarantine like myself, or we're being, this is 2020 has been like the worst year. Everybody's I've never seen people so excited for New Year's, right? Obviously this is like a big deal. We can't wait to get rid of 2020. I saw a cute thing on Facebook. Somebody said that they already don't like the next year because even just saying the words 2021 means that like the year 2021, although I think that's a bad pun, but okay, whatever it is. Okay. So we're going to talk about, the 4 perceptions. Now, I just wanted to interesting. Remember, this is a little bit off the topic, but I just think it's cool. So I just want to share with you. A Jewish person's last name is very important. Did you know that? A lot of times, the name, your last name, will depict a certain job that maybe your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents or maybe even great-great-grandparents had, right? So I'll tell you a very cool story, very quick story. There was a girl that I used to teach. She lives in Crown Heights now, I believe. And she had a very interesting last name, a last name that I had never heard of in the Jewish community. It's not like, Moskowitz or a Goldberg or Goldstein. It was very, very, very rare. Her last name was Thum, Thum. Her name is Amanda Thum, right? She gives me permission to tell the story, Amanda Thum. So I said to her, it's a very interesting last name you have. Like, where does it come from? She goes, Rabbi, we come from a very special family. So I said, what special family do you come from? She says, Rabbi, in Hebrew, my last name Thum is not pronounced Thumb. It's pronounced Tum, like Toom, because my father is a Kohen, and he can transmit, or he can follow his ancestry all the way to the high priest, because it comes from the Urim V'Tumim. Remember I called it the Urim V'Tumim, that special pocket behind the breastplate? Her family was that of the high priest. So her last name was not Thumb, it was Tum, meaning holders of the tomb, holders of this special pocket that the high priest had. So it's unbelievable when a person can actually document their history going all the way back to Aaron, the first Kohen, which is very, very special. She was a bat Kohen. Her father was a Kohen, which is very, very special. So it's very interesting if you ever want to look past, if you want to look at your last names to think about what their etymology was and what it means. Perhaps it was a reason, maybe something that your grandfather did for a living or whatever it was. Learn a lot about yourself by your last names. But anyway.
Just a fun fact. Samantha, you want to tell us a fun fact about the name Aaron? Your boyfriend's name is Aaron.
Is he a Kohen?
She doesn't know if he is.
Okay.
She's not sure.
So there's a very easy way to figure out. The next time, unfortunately, if you have a reason to go to a cemetery, usually the tribe that a person comes from is usually documented on tombstone. So if he's going to visit, let's say, a grandfather or a great grandfather, it's easy. It's either what's your boyfriend's last name?
Franklin.
Franklin. Okay, that could be anything. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. That's
there are certain last names usually.
He is Jewish, so
no judgment. But usually, if a person's last name is Cohen, right, that's a classic name. Or Katz.
Right.
Katz is also a famous Cohen last name. I will tell you something pretty interesting. You're gonna find this somewhat cool, but also somewhat insulting at the same time. Why I say this.
Okay. Insulting and cool.
Jewish. This is not to Samantha. This is to the whole class. Jewish last names are not always what they seem to be, right? For thousands of years, Jews did not have last names. We were always our name and the name of our father. So like when a person gets called up to the Torah on Shabbat, so they like, my name is David Yosef Aryeh, that's my Hebrew name. Ben, my father's name, Yaakov, the son of my father. So for years, that's the way it was. So if you are very often, if anybody here is Bukharian or Persian, whatever it is, very often like your last name for a Bukharian person will be like Rubinov, son of Reuben or daughter of Reuben or whatever it is. It's usually that's the way it is, okay? However, there was a time in Europe where the government demanded of the Jews to choose last names in order to keep track of us, either because they wanted to persecute us or because they wanted to keep us in check. I don't know, for whatever reasons. The European government said that Jews have to choose last names. Now, Jews, obviously, can you imagine Jews that didn't follow directions? Yes, there were, right? Jewish people that were not interested in choosing last names. So the government said, if you don't choose last names by such and such a date, we're going to choose them for you. So let's say there was a group of Jews that just decided not to listen to what the government had to say. So the government would knock, knock, knock on the door. They would look at the person and they would say, okay, you're very white-skinned, or you're very light-skinned, so we'll call you Weiss or Weiss. Or if you're very dark-skinned, we'll call you Schwarz or Schwartz. And if you're very skinny, we'll call you Klein or Klein. Or if you're very heavy, we'll call you Gross or Gross. So look at that, 4 or 5 very, very famous Jewish last names, which were actually somewhat insulting. So if you know any Jews with the last names Weiss or Klein or Schwartz or Gross, right? All those last names were actually names that were given to us or assigned to us by the governments because we didn't want to choose last names for ourselves. That was very interesting. Something that my teacher, Rabbi Beryl Wine, shared with us when I was in yeshiva. But anyways, okay. So let's get back to the topic. Let's get to this. So we're going to talk about the 4 things. We have about 15 minutes. So we'll see as best as I can do. Okay, here we go. So the first possibility of why bad things are happening to you is, number 1, is it really bad? Is it really bad? Which means sometimes we can see, we have a very, very short perspective of what we see in life. Something bad happens to us and we don't see the larger picture. So is it really bad, right? So I have a great book in my house, which talks about a story about a man, a religious Jewish man who was on a plane, or he was just about to get on a plane, and he sits down on the plane, he gets comfortable, and he realizes that he made a very, very big mistake. He left his tefillin in the airport, right? So for those who don't know, tefillin are what's called phylacteries. It's those leather straps that Jewish men put on in the mornings, right? And they're very expensive and they're very precious. And this person made a big mistake and he left them in the terminal. So he spoke to the steward. He said, "Stewardess, I left something very important and very precious in the terminal. Will you please let me get off the plane to retrieve my package?" And the stewardess said, "I'm so sorry. FAA regulations state that as soon as we taxi onto the runway, cannot get off the plane. It's illegal." So the person made such a ruckus and he made such an argument that the air marshal, because there's an air marshal on every flight, the air marshal arrested this Jew and he spent the rest of his day in prison, right? So you would say, whoa, this is not fair. Where's the justice, right? Here's a good man. He is religious. He puts on his tefillin every morning. He's a very religious person, right? And here, look, something very, very bad happened to him. Well, that plane flew into the North Tower of the Twin Towers, right? And he was the last person to get off that plane before, unfortunately, everybody, as we know, was killed, right? So here's this person. He's in prison now, but he's thanking God every moment that he's in prison because it saved his life, right? The fact that he left his tefillin where he left them, he got off the plane and his life was saved in that very, very special way. So the first thing is it really bad? This is true about really a lot of things in life, because the truth is we have a very little understanding of what really, really is bad, right? So for example, we know a little bit about our past, and we know, I would say, more about our present, and we know really nothing about our future. So when we see things in a very small perspective, we say that God lives outside of time. God knows everything that was, everything that currently is, and everything that will be. So when something happens in our time, right, we go, God, this is not fair. This is not justified. It's not right. We can't, this is not okay. But God says, sweetheart, you don't know anything that will be. You know slightly about what was. So you don't understand the grand plan. You don't see the grand plan. But we in our frame, so we say that it's bad, but we don't really see the general picture, right? So that's the first thing. Is it really bad? We're not sure. Sometimes we have to wait. You'll figure it out maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years now, or maybe after you're dead. I remember, I think I said this in the last class that I gave, but I'll repeat it because I think you guys are all new. It's hard to imagine because I'm so super cool now. This is the cool rabbi you get to listen to. But back in the day when I was in elementary school, I used to struggle a lot with popularity, right? And I used to get picked on relentlessly by the cool kids, right? I used to get picked on every single day. And I was religious then, right? Because I started off religious, I left religion, and then I came back to it. And I remember I used to cry, I used to say, God, why have you made my life so terrible? Right? Every single day I get picked on. I get terrorized in school every single day. Like, why are you doing this to me? Now, I'm not a prophet. I don't know why bad things happen to good people, right? But I can tell you, 30 years later, looking back, I'm a much greater rabbi. I'm a much greater therapist. I'm also a marriage counselor, a couples counselor, a drug counselor, a grief counselor, that I'm a much better counselor because I've had these life experiences, right? So I don't know, maybe that's the reason, maybe it's not the reason, I don't know. But I know that when a client comes to me, when a young boy or a young girl comes to me and says, Rabbi, I'm struggling in school, but you probably don't know what I'm talking about. And I could say, actually, you know what, hold on, I do know what you're talking about. Here's how I got through it. So while I'm not God, I don't know why bad things happen to good people. I know that perhaps my experiences were not completely bad. There was a reason for it. And one need only to give time to be able to understand perhaps why that thing happened to me. Does that make sense so far? Any questions, any comments, criticisms? Good? Awesome, we paying attention? Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next one then. Okay, the next one I don't like talking about because it's the hardest one to discuss. But here we go, we're gonna talk about it. Okay, it could be because of punishment. Punishment means Hashem wants to change a behavior in our life. Now, before we think punishment means, go to your room or, you're going to get hit or whatever it is, that's not the punishment we're talking about. So let me clarify. If my daughter, I have 7 kids, thank God, but if my younger daughter decides to run across the street, right, and I scream at her or I yell at her, does that make me a bad father or a good father for trying to protect her so that she remembers that she shouldn't walk across the street without looking both ways? So I would like to think that I'm a good father because I'm trying to discipline her to understand that she should look both ways before she crosses the street, right? So when God wants to change behavior, things happen in order for us to allow that to happen. So let me give you a beautiful story. Okay, you'll like this story. It's a bit of an old story, but I think it's a story you'll appreciate. So I had a rabbi in yeshiva by the name of Rabbi David Orlovsky. He was an amazingly hilarious rabbi. He has lots of YouTube videos. If you want to have a great laugh and get inspired, if you like my material, you'll hear a lot of the same stuff from Rabbi Orlovsky because I get a lot of his pizzazz and a lot of his presentation. He's wonderful. So he told us this amazing story. He said one day, a young lady came to him, I guess it was like the 80s or the 90s, and said, Rabbi, I have a broken arm. He shows the rabbi, she has a broken arm in her cast. He says, Rabbi, tell me, why did God make me break my arm? So Rabbi Arlovsky strokes his beard and he goes, I got it. I know why. You're a klutz. Obviously, you need to be more careful. So she laughed and says, obviously, I'm just a rabbi. I don't know. What do you think? Just rabbis don't know the future. Rabbis, as we said, we don't have the Kohen Gadol. We don't know. So why would I know? How would I know that you broke your arm? She goes, no, Rabbi, it's more than that. She says, Rabbi, I broke my arm on my birthday. And for the last 2 years, I've broken my arm both on my birthday. And so Rabbi's like, okay, that's an interesting coincidence. He says, no, but Rabbi, it gets worse. I said, what else? How does this happen? I had roller skating parties. And if anybody goes roller skating, it's kind of an old thing to do. But I have these roller skating parties. And every time I go on my roller skating party, I break my arm. Rabbi, why are bad things happening to me? So my rabbi thought about it and he goes, well, maybe you're just not a very good roller skater. Maybe you just fall because you're not very good. So she goes, Rabbi, you don't understand. I roller skate professionally. I never fall. I'm a professional skater. I skate on TV. I never fall. And the only time I fall is on my birthday. So now, Rabbi, please tell me, why do I keep breaking my arm? So the rabbi said, okay, I'm not going to poo-poo this away. Let me give you an explanation. He says, listen, I don't know why for sure this is happening to you because I'm just a rabbi. And rabbis don't know the future. He said, but I'll give you a possibility and maybe this will give you comfort. He said, it's interesting that you always break your right arm and not your left. I said, why? Because the right arm, according to Judaism, is considered the stronger arm or the more dominant arm, right? It's supposed to be the arm of chesed. Chesed in Hebrew means kindness, right? So we're supposed to train ourselves. That's why the old adage says, is it better to give $100 to one person or $1 to 100 people? And the rabbis all agree that it's better to give $1 to 100 people. Why? Because I'm strengthening my arm. This is the right hand that's supposed to be able to open up your wallet, take out the dollar and give it. And it's a practice. And if you do this 100 times, it will train you to be a more giving person. So he said, maybe God is trying to teach you that instead of having a birthday party, which is all about me, right? My desires, my wants, it's my party and I'll cry if I want to, right? The old expression, right? Instead of that, maybe have a party and take the presents and give them to charity. So she thought it was a great idea. So she said, okay, Rabbi, next birthday party for next year, I'm going to give, I'm going to tell the guests, in lieu of presents this year, please donate to a charity of your choice. So they all did that year. And that year she didn't break her arm. So now, was my rabbi right? Maybe. Was he wrong? Maybe. I don't know. Is she a better person? Definitely. That's the difference. You see, as long as a person can be aware about changing one's life, even if you got the message a little bit wrong, like let's say a person speaks too much gossip and God is trying to teach that person a lesson. So the next time they walk into a room, someone opens the door and the door hits them right in the mouth. And then the person goes, oh, this is a lesson. I need to give more charity. So did you miss the lesson? You missed the lesson, but you're still becoming a greater person. So it's so important for a person to introspect and begin to, and not become obsessed about this, because if you become obsessive about it, it's not good either. But begin to introspect and say, is there a reason for the things that are happening in my life, right? So I'll tell you, obviously, the story I'm about to tell you is a very extreme story. So I'm not expecting every single person here to live by this, because the average person, myself included, does not live on this level. But I just want to show you that such a level exists. Okay, listen to this story. This story is brought down in the biography of a great rabbi by the name of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, of blessed memory. Rabbi Feinstein was probably the leading halachic authority in America in the 80s and 90s. He's world renowned as being one of the greatest rabbis of our generation. I'm sure Chai Sarah knows Rabbi Feinstein and knew who he was. Very, very big tzaddik, of course. So the story goes that one day Rabbi Feinstein was sitting learning in his house. He was sitting learning Torah in his house, when all of a sudden from the kitchen, he hears the Rebbitzin, his wife, scream out in pain. She goes, she screams. So he runs into the kitchen to check on his wife. And it turns out that she was boiling some milk on the stove, and some of the milk that boiled over out of the stove and burned the Rebbitzins' hand, right? So things like this happen to us all the time, right? So for normal humans like us, we don't, we get out the butter or we put some ice on it and we don't think about it for the rest of the day. That's usually the way it goes. But when you're Rabbi Feinstein and Rebbitzin Feinstein, so you look at life a little bit differently. So Rabbi Feinstein says, the Rebbitzin never burns her hand. This has never happened before. So we have to go sit down now and think about why the Rebbitzin burned her hand. What could be the reason? So they begin to think, and they both think that they came up with a reason. So back in those days, right, they had something called a milkman. I don't know if you knew about this, right? But back in the day, you didn't go to the grocery store to buy a jug of milk or a gallon of milk. That you would order, you would have a certain order that would come to the house, and the guy would deliver the milk in a jug, and you'd get this delivery every week. So it happened to be that week the milkman forgot his order, or he forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot his order. The milkman was not paid. The Rebbitzin was unable to pay that week, or she forgot to pay the guy. And she says, "Oh, it must be the reason that we forgot to pay the guy." So what happened? They quickly, the Rabbi and Rebbitzin Feinstein went to the house of the milkman and said, "Here you go. Please, please take the money that we owed you for this week." And the milkman began to cry. And Rebbitzin said, "Well, you okay? What's going on?" He says, "Well, you should know I'm very, very poor, and I didn't have any money to make Shabbat this week. And now that you paid me my money, now I can make Shabbat this week." So obviously, for us to be on that level is a very, very high level. But for a person like Rabbi Feinstein and his wife, that was a very, very high level. Does that make sense? I can't see anybody. Is it possible for people to turn on their cameras? Because I feel like I'm talking to myself. Is that possible? Awesome. Okay, at least one person, just so I know that I'm not talking to myself, would be appreciative.
All right, I was taking notes. So I'm like looking down. So I'm just.
Okay, yeah, I see. When I don't see any faces, I get nervous. Okay, I want to share one more very, very beautiful story that really is going to really make you think. Okay, so we had a speaker when I was the rabbi at Stony Brook. We had a speaker who came to talk about his experiences on 9/11. He was on the 74th floor when the planes hit. His office was on the 74th floor and of the Twin Towers, and he was actually in the sky lobby, which was on the 50th floor when the plane hit just above. And he talks about this unbelievable story of how he made his way down the stairwell and literally made it out of the buildings just seconds before they collapsed. So it's a really amazing story. His name is Avi Schonbrun. He wrote a book called Miracle on the 78th, I believe, or Miracle on the 74th. You can go check out his book. It's unbelievable. But I want to tell you the story that he told us when he came to Stony Brook to lecture to our students. And it has nothing to do with the Twin Towers, but just this understanding of being able to see the world and being able to introspect. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So Avi tells over the story that he was a very, very, very wealthy businessman. And he's driving into the city every single day. He just bought himself a brand new car. He had just purchased himself a brand new $150,000 car, a brand new Jaguar XK8, which is a really nice car. And he's feeling really good about himself, big time businessman. And he's doing well. He's making lots of money. He's got an Armani suit. He's driving a gorgeous car. So he feels really good about himself. Then all of a sudden, as he's driving to work one day in his fancy suit and in his fancy car, he feels a huge blam, splat, like big explosion. What happened? There was a teenager or a kid on the side of the road in Manhattan that took a brick, picked up a brick and threw the brick at his car. And he was furious. My brand new car? Oh my gosh. And this guy threw a brick at my brand new car. So immediately he pulls over to the side of the road, right? He looks at his bumper on his brand new Jaguar, and there's a mark this big of a brick on the back bumper of his car. And he looks at this kid on the side of the road, about like this 10-year-old kid, and he gets furious. His brain is like red and smoke coming out of his ears, right? And he goes, "How dare you?" And he runs over to this kid. He grabs him by the shirt. He says, "Do you know how much my car costs? Where's your mother? She's going to pay for this damage, right? Can't believe, how did you do this? How could you do this?" And the kid begins to cry. And he says, he's not a rabbi. He says, "Sir, please put me down. Let me explain to you. Please put me down." So the guy puts him down. He says, "Yeah, explain to me. How dare you? How dare you throw this brick at my car? What were you thinking?" So this is what the boy said. He said, "I have an older brother. He's 18 years old. And my older brother is handicapped. And he's in a wheelchair. And I was pushing the wheelchair. I wanted to take my brother out to get some air, right? And as I was pushing the wheelchair hit a rock and the wheelchair overturned. And now, and my brother, he's 18 years old. He's too heavy for me to pick up. And I'm trying to get somebody's attention. Please help me pick my brother up from the mud and put him back in his wheelchair. And go figure, New York City, nobody wants to help anybody. That's unfortunate in New York, is people are very cold here, right? And I couldn't get anybody's attention. But you were the first car that drove by, and I tried, and I had to somehow get your attention. I saw a brick on the road, and I said, this is the only way to get this person's attention, so I threw the brick. So immediately, Avi calmed down, and he said, okay, show me where your brother is. So they went into an alleyway nearby, and he saw that there was a kid there. There was an 18-year-old boy face down in the mud. And immediately Avi, knelt down, picked up this boy, cleaned him up, and put him back in the wheelchair. So Avi finishes the story by saying, I want you to know that I never fixed my car. I never fixed you look at my car today, you'll still see a brick mark. Why? What was the lesson, ladies? He said, you either listen to the whispers or you wait for the brick. You hear what I just said? I'm going to repeat it. That's how important I think it is. You either listen for the whispers or you wait for the brick, which means that our entire life, God talks to us. In the beginning, it's barely a whisper, but then things become more apparent, right? So first it's, hey, this is God. I want to have a conversation. And we ignore it because it's a small thing. It's a minor thing. We don't even look at it. And then the whispers get a little bit louder, and then they get louder. And then they get louder and louder until something really, really bad happens, which forces people to become religious and say, oh, woe is to me, woe is God, right? We only turn to God when all the best doctors say there's nothing more we can do for this person, and then everybody becomes religious. Then we go and pray, right? So that's why my rabbi always taught me to sweat the small stuff, because we don't want the small stuff to become big stuff. So when we sweat the small stuff and we say, well, this tiny thing is happening, what can we do in our life to make ourselves better Jews or better people? Can I give more charity? Can I speak nicer? Can I treat people with more respect? Whatever it is that I can do, sweat the small stuff so that small stuff doesn't become big stuff, right? So conversely, another lady came to my Rabbi Orlovsky, and with her story of woe, and she said, Rabbi, my children don't want anything to do with me. My husband left me. I'm struggling with drugs. His whole life. So my rabbi said to her, he said, I feel very bad, obviously, that these terrible things are happening to you. I said, I just have one question. What would it take for you to realize that God wanted to be in touch with you? So she said, oh, I don't know, fire, death in the family. So Rabbi said, oy vey, right? Why would you wait for something so huge to happen for a person to turn to God, right? That's the expression, no atheist in a foxhole, right? When the bullets are flying and the grenades are crashing all around you, then everybody prays. Right? So what the message that I'm trying to share with you today is, don't wait for the grenades. Don't wait for the bullets to fly. In our life where we are, when small things are happening, when challenges of people are getting sick or whatever it is, we say, what can we do as people to be better to our neighbor? Just, this is a little bit of a side note, but I think it's very, very important. COVID is terrible, right? Unarguably, COVID is absolutely terrible. But the good thing about COVID is it gives us an amazing opportunity to do kindness for other people. Do you know any old people that maybe that you can get food for them, or someone that needs to be cheered up, or someone that's sick, that's in quarantine that you could help? There's millions of ways that you could help people today. Millions of ways. I don't like people that I see on Facebook that, like COVID strong or whatever it is, and they put like a little banner on their Facebook page or their picture, and they think, I've done mine as a caring individual. No, a real caring person. Samantha, we were talking about Aaron. So I want to tell you something beautiful about your boyfriend. I've never met him before, but I'll tell you something beautiful about your boyfriend's name. So it says about the original Aaron. The original Aaron the Torah says was an Ohev Shalom and a Rodev Shalom. So what does that mean? It says that Aaron loved peace and he ran after peace. So what does it mean that he loved peace and he ran after peace? Because it's not enough, the Torah says, for a person to say, I love peace. I'll go on my Facebook page and I'll put it on my Facebook account. I hereby love peace. Not enough. The Rodev Shalom. He ran after it. He got off his butt. He left his computer and he went out and helped people. That was the beauty of Aaron HaKohen. It wasn't enough that he preached the talk, but he actually went out and made a difference. And that's the difference here. A person needs to use COVID as an opportunity to help others. Right?
So sweet. I love that.
Isn't that beautiful? Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk too. Go out and help.
Love it.
Lovely. Okay.
Do you
So
mean to say, wait, one second, do you mean to say that like her boyfriend's going around and delivering food for people? Like that's what he's doing now as DoorDash. All the people that are in COVID, they don't have anyone to go. Even if he's getting paid, it's still an act of kindness to go around and give food to people.
I feel very strongly, and this is an argument that I have with my wife often, but I want to share in my arguments with my wife, that whatever profession, ladies, that you choose in the future should be a profession in the helping field. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a rabbi. You could be a social worker, you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, you could be an Indian chief, whatever it is that helps other people. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. We have a plague in New York, aside from the coronavirus. You know what we have? We have these people called meter maids. You know what meter maids do? They go down the street every single day, and if they can find one thing wrong with your car, you get a ticket for $35, $50, or $100, right? That's what they look at the registration, they look at the inspection. That's their job. Their job is to walk down the streets every day and give you tickets. That's their job. And you know, whenever I go out in the morning and I see that big nasty red or orange New York City ticket, I'm like, oh, dang it! Like, what did I do now? What happened? What's wrong? And my wife would always say to me, David, don't get mad at them because they're only doing their job. To which I always respond, if my job was to make millions of New Yorkers angry every day, I wouldn't want that job. I wouldn't want the job. I wouldn't want the job that everybody hates. I don't want that. I don't want that job. I want a job that brings nachas to the world. I want a job that brings pride and joy. I want to help people. I want to cause people to smile. Whatever job I'm doing, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, doesn't matter. But a job that's going to make people smile, not a job that's going to make people grimace. Right? That's very, very important. So it's very beautiful to hear, Samantha, that your boyfriend is living up to his name and being like his forefather, Aaron HaKohen, who loved peace and also pursued it as well. Okay?
Thank you.
4 minutes.
Can I ask a quick question that I know a lot of people would probably want to know about? Like,
go for it.
Like, let's say just like the simple things, like let's say frustrations that happen to you in your life, like you lose things for hours and you're searching for it and you can't find it. And then you found a few hours later and it messed up your whole day, your schedule, and because you lost it, you missed this thing, and that one was annoyed at you, and like frustrations that come in your way that are like really annoying, and you just want to scream from them instead of.
You're gonna love this. You're really gonna love this. I'll tell you why. Because my rabbi, I brought this question to my rabbi, probably the greatest rabbi I ever met in my life. Somebody by the name of Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, of blessed memory, was my rabbi, my everything. Somebody I love and miss every single day. I brought this question to him. And girls, you're going to love this because it gave me so much pleasure and so much joy and serenity in my life. This is what he said. He said, the fact that small things happen to you is proof that God loves you. I said, what are you talking about? Bad things happen to me. So he explained to me there's an idea called Isurim. What are Isurim? Isurim, according to the Torah, are minor inconveniences. I wanted to get a soda from the soda machine. So I wanted to pick out change from my pocket. I was fishing around for quarters, and all I got were nickels. That's annoying. I was trying to get up out of bed in the morning, and I was still half asleep, and I slammed my toe on the corner of the bed. Everybody hates that. Dang it, whatever it is, right? Isurim. I was trying to reach or call somebody, and every time I call that person, I get a busy signal. Isurim, minor inconveniences. Why? Where does this come from? So here's where it comes from, ladies. This is really amazing. Listen to this. The truth is, none of us, and I love myself into what I'm about to say, none of us are truly good in the sense we do everything right. I don't do everything right. I presume you don't do everything right. And really, according to the letter of the law, right, if God was what's called midot hadin, if he was a judgmental God, really, none of us should exist because none of us keep Shabbat the way that we're supposed to, myself included. None of us keep kosher the way they should. None of us do everything exactly what the Torah prescribes. So instead of God, so to speak, shoving down the lightning bolt like Zeus, because you don't see that happening, nobody gets fired, right, like that, God creates Isurim. So God says, this person did something that was really, really bad, but I have mercy on this person. So instead of giving that person the big hurt, so to speak, I measure that punishment so out into thousands and thousands of little inconveniences that you would probably otherwise never even notice in one's life. So when bad things happen, that's why there's an old expression, if your parents were Eastern European, which my grandparents are, whenever things like this would happen to me, and I would say, Bubby, which is grandmother in Yiddish, I would say, Bubby, did you hear what just happened to me? I broke a mirror in the house, or I stubbed my toe, or I got a splinter. And any Eastern European bubby will tell you, salzaina kapura. And Yiddish means it should be a kapara on something bigger. It should be as a cleanup for a larger punishment, which maybe, God forbid, was supposed to come to a person. Right? So Rabbi Scheinberg said, when something small happens to you, it's God saying, I love you. So I'm staying away from the big stuff. And we'll talk about the big stuff in a second. Say, but what about the big stuff then, Rabbi? We'll get to it, obviously. But when it comes to the minor inconveniences, when they happen in your life, you say, thank God. And Rabbi Scheinberg said to me once, he says, if nothing bad has happened to you in a week, you should question whether God loves you or not. Now you'll say to me, oh, well, nothing bad happened to me in a week. Again, you have to say nothing bad. It means like you didn't stub your toe once, you didn't get a busy phone signal, you didn't lose a parking spot. Obviously small things, annoying things happen to us all the time. But when a person can look at Isurim as minor inconvenience and say that these are here instead of, God forbid, larger things, which could potentially be very, very detrimental to our life, right? Then that is a great blessing in our life. So these things also, by the way, and I'll give you one other piece to this as well, Chai Sar, so I'm happy you brought it up. Minor inconveniences are such a blessing. And you'll explain to me, I'll say, well, why are they such a blessing? I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to take off my rabbi hat for a second. I'm going to put on the psychology hat. I'm a therapist. So I'm going to tell you the therapy. Here's my therapy angle on this as well. I'm dating myself here a little bit. So you'll see I'm a little bit of an older guy. I remember something called MTV. Did you guys ever watch MTV? Yeah. I was a big MTV buff. I loved MTV. And I learned so much about the human interaction through watching MTV. There were 2 or 3 shows I used to always watch, right? The first show was something called My Sweet 16, right? If you remember, Samantha remembers, My Sweet 16. And then My Sweet 16 turned into Bridezillas, which was another show that MTV used to have, Bridezillas, right? So what were these shows about? Unbelievable. Listen to this, girls. You'll love this. My Sweet 16 was a show about girls, right? Whose fathers had PhDs. You know what PhD stands for? Papa has dough, right? A lot of money. Daddy has lots and lots of money. So he spoils his daughter rotten, gives her everything she ever wanted. And the story, usually the way it goes, I remember watching a particular episode, which is in my mind, right? The father rents out this huge wedding hall, this huge party. This was the 90s. NSYNC was very popular. So NSYNC is playing at the Sweet 16. Justin Timberlake and the whole group is there. They're all playing. Unbelievable, wonderful, right? All of a sudden, there's a drum roll, like, drum roll, please, right? And all of a sudden, under a silk cloth, clearly it's a car, right, comes out. And her father pulls off pulls off the curtain, and there is a $200,000 yellow Maserati. A yellow Maserati, unbelievable. 16-year-old girl, and she just got herself a brand new $200,000 yellow Maserati. Unbelievable. And all of a sudden, the girl's face turns red. And she looks at her father and screams at him and says, "Daddy, you promised me a red one." And she throws her father out of the very party that he paid for. Unbelievable. You give a girl a $200,000 car and she says, "I wanted a red one"? Craziness. And these same girls, and by the way, it's not girls. I'm not just picking on the ladies. Guys can be this way too, right? And these girls grow up to be bridezillas. "Oh, Mrs. So-and-so, I'm so sorry. I know you wanted the white limo. Instead, we got you the black Hummer," and said, "You ruined my wedding." And then they beat up the guy. They go crazy. "Oh, we're sorry, Miss So-and-so. I know you wanted the vanilla cake with the chocolate frosting. Instead, we got you the chocolate cake with the vanilla frosting. Oh, you ruined my wedding." And she takes the cake and she throws it in the guy's face, and it makes for good television, right? That's what this is. Why does this happen, ladies? I love it. The human experience. Why does this happen? I'm going to tell you why. These girls have never really had to suffer in life. They never had to struggle. They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, right? So anytime something remotely bad happens to these kids, they go nuts because they're not used to things. They've been born with everything being handed to them, right? You know who never acts this way? Children of immigrants. You'll never see it. You'll never see it. Because when your father or your grandfather had to wait online for bread in the Soviet Union, you will never take bread for granted for the rest of your life. But these kids were incredibly spoiled from the day that we were born, right? They never had Isurim. They never really had minor inconveniences. Every time a slight little thing happened, they had a servant come to fix it. So they never had to deal with these things, right? So you know what happens to them? They grow up to be spoiled, wretched, disgusting people. Now, think about our lives, ladies. We are normal. We are healthy, men and women who all deal with normal, healthy men and women problems. We deal with schools, we deal with grades, we deal with jobs, job loss, job gain, we deal with illnesses, we deal with COVID, we deal with all these types of things that teach us to be tough, that teach us to handle life's challenges. So when we have isurim in our lives, they are not pain. They may be painful at the time, but in reality, they are blessing because it teaches us to not be spoiled. It teaches us to be grateful. It teaches us to be a well-rounded individual. So when we grow up, we don't turn into these nasty bridezillas that we see on TV. We become normal, well-rounded adults who will teach our kids the same thing. So the challenges that we have and that we face in our life can be construed as negative. Of course, it's bad. No one likes to get a stubbed toe. No one likes to this and that. But these challenges actually create the person that you see before you. I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life, things that I prefer not to share with you, a lot of ups and downs and things, whatever it was, but that made me into the rabbi that I am today. Think about your life and where you are today. You all look like very successful, wonderful individuals, but you probably had a lot of hard times in your life, right? That helped mold your character into the way that you are today. So instead of looking at those challenges as challenges, look at them as the ultimate blessings that turn you into the wonderful individual that you are. Does that make sense, Chaya Sarah? That was kind of a long answer to a very short question.
I wanted to.
Okay,
Sorry,
Deb.
I actually wanted to ask a question. I know it's like very like major, and maybe there's gonna be an answer you didn't get to yet. But
okay,
if we look at things like Yov, for example, from the Navi Yov, or things like the Holocaust, there are horrible things that you can't really explain. Like they're really good people, and there's no explanation.
Okay, we're going to talk about that right now. That was actually the next one. Debbie, you got me to the very next possibility. Okay, so far, first of all, Debbie's question is phenomenal, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. First, we said, is it really bad? We talked about the bus blow. We talked about the plane. Is it really bad? Then we spoke about punishment. So now we're going to speak about, Debbie brought it up, group punishment. Rabbi, I understand, maybe you're saying this person needs to change their life, and I understand that isn't really bad. Okay, wonderful. But think about 6 million Jews, and you cannot say, and I agree with Debbie, just to throw this out there, that it was the religious versus not religious, because plenty of religious people died during the Holocaust, many of which were my family, right? My entire family, practically with the exception of my grandfather, was murdered. All of them. So this was not a question of ones who kept Shabbat versus ones who didn't keep Shabbat, or the ones that were pious versus the ones that were not, because we were murdered all the same. Religious, non-religious, Hasidim. If we were Jewish, right? In fact, I'm going to tell you something. Okay, I'll save what I'm about to say for later, but I'll answer the question like this. Okay, here's the way I can answer this question. So as you know, as you can see in the back here, I love hockey, right? So how am I going to answer this question with hockey? At least I could say I used to play ice hockey with my son. My son is really, really good, right? And I learned something from playing hockey. You know, there's a lot of rules, especially for somebody who's new to the game. And if you're not familiar with these rules, you will get penalized, or you will get the whistle blown, and you'll have a penalty very, very often, right? So when I was practicing hockey with my son, right, and let's say I went offsides, or I committed some sort of a penalty in the game, the coach would blow the whistle, he would say, okay, everybody down and give me 20. And we all would have to get down on our knees, right, in our hockey gear, and we all did push-ups. Every one of us, 20 push-ups, everybody on the team. So I went over to the coach, and I said, Coach, I'm the one who committed the penalty. Make me do 20 push-ups. So you know what the coach says? No, that's not how it works. When one person on the team screws up, everybody does push-ups. Why? Because the team that does push-ups together sticks together, right? I want to tell you something else very, very beautiful. We were talking about 9/11 before. You know, 9/11 was a terrible time for New York. But in a certain way, it was one of the greatest times for New York. And I'll explain to you why I say that. Now, I was not in New York on 9/11. I was actually studying in Israel at the time. I was playing football at Kraft Stadium, right? And we saw all these airplanes, not airplanes, helicopters coming in, right? But I asked my grandparents, and I mentioned this in the last class. So I apologize that I'm. We
love it.
Okay, but I know the girls are new, so they didn't hear it. So I asked my grandparents. You were here in Queens. What was it like? right? What was it like? So they said, you know, I have never seen New Yorkers love each other so much. Today, New Yorkers, if you look at somebody on the subway today, they're going to punch you in the face. You can't do it, right? The New Yorkers are very tough. He said, but the days after 9/11, you know, regardless of your politics, Democrat, Republican, you had a sticker on your car that said, "We support the NYPD." If you, regardless of whether you were Democrat or Republican, you had an American flag on your lawn, and we felt a certain sense of love for each other that we didn't feel ever before. You know why? Because the attacks on 9/11 were not targeted against Jews or non-Jews or Black people or white people or Chinese people or Russian people or Indian people. The attacks on 9/11 were targeted against New Yorkers. And because the attacks were on New Yorkers, we felt like a family, and we fought for each other, and we stood by each other, and we loved each other. And we pray that, God forbid, something like that should never happen again. But the love that we felt for each other was unlike anything New York has seen before. And this is not a new idea. The Jews have felt like this for thousands of years. Can you ever imagine why God would want to give the Jewish people his Torah after our exodus of Egypt? Do you know what happened? Do you know why the story of Egypt is so important in Jewish Jewish scriptures? You know why? Because we really weren't a people yet. When Pharaoh enslaved us, when he cracked the whip, you know what happened? We started to love each other. We started to look past our problems and our challenges and began to back each other up. And you know what God said? I see my people are loving each other the way they should. Now is when I'm going to give them the Torah. When they feel close, when they love each other. So now, I don't know if anybody here is a parent yet. Everybody looks young here. I'm a parent. I have 7 kids, right? But one of the things you'll notice, sometimes when the kids don't get along, you know what the parent goes? Everybody go to your room. Everybody just go to your room. And then you know what happens when the kids start saying, he started it, she did it, he called me a name, she did this, blah, 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 blah. And you know what you'd say as a parent? You guys are all getting punished. That's it. You're not going out for the week. Everybody's docked for the weekend, right? Until you guys can figure this out on your own. That's why I think, in my personal opinion, why God creates group punishment. Group punishment, and I don't think it is a happenstance, where often, unfortunately, these things happen when Jewish people are as divisive as they can be, when we're as far away from each other, when we see differences, when we hate each other. Sinat chinam, the worst sin, when Jews hate each other for good or bad reasons, doesn't matter what kind of reasons, but Jews hate each other. And God says, I have to bring something terrible in the world so that you guys can remember that you're a family. And it's very interesting if you think about it. Debbie, you brought up the Holocaust, right? The ultimate factor, the ultimate lining factor, you know what Hitler says? And we have to ask ourselves, was Hitler ultimately bad for the Jewish people? Obviously, physically speaking, he was. Or good for the Jewish people when you think about this idea of theology of when Hitler himself said, it doesn't matter if you're a religious Jew, and it doesn't matter if you're a secular Jew. You're all the same, right? Isn't that a beautiful thing? Hitler taught us that. He taught us that in a very terrible way, but he still taught us that lesson. He said, it doesn't matter if you're a Hasidic man with long peot, and it doesn't matter if you're a girl wearing pants. Every single Jew is a family. Every single Jew needs to love each other, care for each other, respect each other. And I don't care what your reasons are for disrespect, doesn't matter. We're all a family. And the more we treat each other with respect, the more we treat each other with love, the less we'll have to have these big reminders. So to answer Debbie's question more indirectly or directly, I can say that it's not a question of who deserved it more or who deserved it less, who was truly righteous, or who truly wasn't righteous. It's more about the fact that we as a nation of Jewish people have to do better, right? I told a story last week about my experiences. Again, I'm not going to tell the whole story now. I'll save it for another time. But I was almost killed in a terrorist attack in 2000 in a bar on Ben Yehuda Street. And I mentioned the story as after the bomb went off, and thankfully I was still alive, right? I saw something unbelievable, right? On Ben Yehuda Street, if you've ever been to Ben Yehuda Street, there's like a road, and on the left side of the road stands all the religious Jews, and on the right side of the road is all the secular Jews, and there's somewhat of a invisible wall in the middle, right? On the left side is where all the bars are and all the fun. On the right side were all the pious rabbis on their way to the Western Wall, right? And then this bar that I was in exploded. There was a terrorist who blew himself up. And then something unbelievable happened, right? The rabbi with the big kippah on his head runs over to the other side of the street to the girl wearing pants and helped dress her wounds because she was bleeding. And the boy who wasn't wearing a kippah, who was a secular boy, runs over to the religious lady who's wearing a long skirt and maybe a head covering because she had a broken leg, and they were helping each other. And I was shocked when I saw this. You know why? Because I said to myself, 2 seconds ago, you were spitting at each other. 2 seconds ago, you were saying, ugh, these stupid religious people, they're so close-minded, what do they know? Or those stupid secular people, they're so, godless and they don't know what the hell they're doing, whatever it is, right? You were spitting at each other. And now a bomb goes off for you to remind each other that you're one mishpacha, that you're one family. And that's why, ladies, we pray that we never want any more reminders. No more Holocausts, no more 9/11s, no anything for us to remind, that God needs to remind us that we're a family. So that's the list. Remember what we said before, listening for the whispers or waiting for the brick. Let's not wait for the brick. Let's now work on our ben adam lachavero, which means working on our relationships with each other. Let's work on extending ourselves. If we see somebody that's maybe not as religious as we are, extend yourself, be nice. You're a representative of the Jewish people, right? We answer to a higher authority, so to speak. So we have a responsibility in the grocery store, at college, wherever you are. It doesn't matter where you are, to extend yourself as much as you possibly can to help other people. That's so important. That's so important, to get along, to show beauty. I just had a lecture with a young lady at one of my classes who is an open, she's bisexual, a conservative Jew. And very strongly so. She says, Rabbi Delman, I love your lectures. I say, why? I'm an Orthodox rabbi. She says, because we're allowed to agree to disagree, right? There are certain things we may not just agree upon, and that's okay. But what's more important is that Jews love each other. That's important. We may disagree about details of this and that, but we are a family. Sometimes a dysfunctional family, but we are a family nonetheless, right? And the more we love each other, the more we see the commonalities that make us close together, the less we see the things that draw us apart. So we may have to agree to disagree in certain areas, and that's fine, as long as it doesn't detract for the love and respect that we have for each other. I see 4 wonderful people. I know Chai Sarah from before, so I already consider her part of my mishpacha, so to speak, but I all consider you as part of my family. I've never met you before, but you're 3 wonderful Jewish people that I automatically already want to have you at my house for Shabbat once COVID is over, get to know you, introduce you to my wife and kids, have the chance and opportunity to study with you, because we're family. That's we are. If we draw ourselves back enough, we were all brother and sister at one point. We're all relatives. We have to take care of each other. We have to learn from each other. Okay. So the last thing I want to say for today, and then we'll open up for questions. This is the last of the 4. So we said, number 1, is it really bad? Number 2 was punishment. Number 3 is group punishment. We just discussed that, right? So now we're going to talk about the last of the 4. Okay. And then we'll finish for today. And that is the 3 most important words I could ever teach you in Judaism, that if there's anything that I've ever taught you, please just remember these 3 words. So easy to teach, so incredibly hard to practice. You ready? Here are the 3 words. Gam, zu, l'tova, which means this is for the best, right? I like this expression because my wife's name is Tova. So I say, this is also for Tova. Everything's for Tova. Everything's for Tova, right? My wife's name is Tova. Gam zu l'tova. Ultimately, everything is for the best. A lot of people say to me, Rabbi, how do you live this way? Just trusting God, it's just like, how do you, I just don't see how you do it. And I literally respond back. I said, I don't know how you do it, right? Sometimes a person needs to realize you are not in control. We're just not in control. We want, as human beings, to have control over everything, control of our destiny. We want to get into college. We want to get good grades. We want this and that. And we have our whole life planned out. And we think I'm going to marry my boyfriend at this time. We're going to have X amount of kids. And then we're going to send them to this private school or this school or that school. And we have our whole lives planned out. But as my grandmother of blessed memory used to say in Yiddish, a Mensch getrecht und Gott gelecht, which means man plans and God laughs, which means we are allowed to have a general idea. But Gam zu l'tova ultimately means we don't have full control, right? And that's why, if you recall, I don't know, maybe when you were in kindergarten and your Mora or your teacher would say, cover your eyes, we're going to say Shema now. And we would cover our eyes and say the famous prayer, Shema Yisrael, right? Why do we cover our eyes, ladies? Do you know why? I'm going to tell you. Because just like a blind person realizes they're blind and needs the help of somebody else to make sure they don't bump into a wall, right? We're supposed to be saying that about ourselves. God, we are like blind mice, right? Why? Because we obviously want to do our shtadlut. In Hebrew means we want to do our due diligence. We want to study hard, apply for the right jobs, marry the right guy. But are we sure? Are we sure that this guy is the right guy for us? Are we sure that this is the right business path that we should take? Are we absolutely sure? We have no idea. We try to make good educated guesses, but at the end of the day, we cannot say anything for certain. Life, if anything that's COVID has taught us, is that just because the things you have today does not necessarily mean you'll have them tomorrow, right? We have to be so grateful, so grateful. So Gam Zula Tova means ultimately, I ultimately get to the point in my life where I accept the fact that I do not have full control. I think, was it Kelly Clarkson or maybe it was, I don't know, it was one of these country singers who said, although I hate taking lessons from Christian areas, but I think it's a very beautiful thing. It says, Jesus, take the wheel. And it was a Kelly Clarkson song, I think. Or the idea that is that I'm kind of along for the ride, and Hashem, or God, not Jesus, but God is more or less in control. Gamzu Tova, somehow, some way, this thing is going to be for the best. So I just want to end this off with this very cute story, okay? Chaisar, I apologize because I said this tiny little story before, but I think it has a lot to do with ending off the class today.
So excited. I can't wait to hear another story.
I have a daughter.
It goes into your heart.
Right. I have a daughter, Tsivia. She's amazing. She's 12 going on 25. She's got this larger than life personality. She's so out there. She's so vocal. One day she'll teach a class. She's amazing. So I remember when she was like 6 years old, she was already like very, very out there. She's very educated, very smart girl, has a lot to say. And she knew already at 6 years old, like where the doctor was, like whenever we were going to take her to the doctor. So as we were pulling up on the street where our family doctor is, my daughter looks me in the eye and says, "Daddy, do you love me?" And I was shocked that my six-year-old daughter would look me in the eye and say, "Daddy, do you love me?" I said, "Sweetheart, of course I love you." And she goes, "And you promised you would never let anything bad happen to me, right?" And I said, "Sweetheart, of course I love you. As long as Daddy's around, Daddy's going to protect you to make sure that nothing bad ever happens to you." So she goes, "Okay." And she gets out of the car and she's happy as a clam. And we walk up the stairs to the doctor. Now, we were there for her vaccine or whatever it was, some shots or whatever it was. And the doctor comes out with a shot and the little, sterilization over there, and, in it goes. And she cries and she looks at me and goes, "Daddy, you lied to me. You promised me that nothing bad would ever happen to me. And look what you did. Now I'm in pain." This is a very small microcosm of how we look at life. We are my little daughter. And we have a very small understanding as a 6-year-old of what life has to offer us. And we go, "Ow, God, I don't like this. It hurts. I don't like this pain. It really, really hurts. This breakup, this bad breakup, this sickness we have in our life." And we say, "God, you are unjust. You are wrong. You are unfair that you gave me this problem." So what do I say to my daughter? I say, "Sweetheart, I love you. And you're not going to understand this now because you're only 6. But because you are having this suffering now, you will not have suffering later. You won't have measles. You won't have mumps. You won't have rubella. You won't have any of these things that we're vaccinating against." I'm not getting into the whole topic of vaccinations. We could talk about that another day, right? But you won't have these problems later because you're dealing with this now. And when we learn to have trust in God, again, we can all agree that God exists, but we're not talking about God's justice. And we can have trust if we could get to that point in our life. And I'm not saying I'm at that point either, because everybody struggles with this, even the rabbi. And I'm going to tell you a story about how I even struggled with this. Okay, I'll tell it to you now. 4 years ago, I lost my grandmother. I was talking a lot about my grandmother. Why? I say this with all due respect to my wife. She was the greatest woman I ever knew in my entire life. I was raised by more or less my father and my grandmother. Okay. And unfortunately, my grandmother had a very, very difficult passing. She developed what we would call Alzheimer's disease. For those of you who know what Alzheimer's disease is, in my opinion, it's the worst disease imaginable because it's not even knowing who your loved ones are anymore. And my grandmother was the most pious woman I could even explain to you. A Holocaust survivor, her whole family was murdered. She hid in a closet for 6 years in hiding in the back of a fake closet with her sister. She had to undergo tremendous, tremendous challenges in life. She had gray hair since the time she was 20 because of all the, she had stillborn children before my mother was born, a terrible, terrible, difficult life. And yet she was incredibly pious. She never missed a day of prayers. She was so religious. And yet she suffered terribly for 8 years before she finally passed away. Okay. And this was just 4 or 5 years ago. I know, because my daughter, I named my daughter Kayla in her memory. And I remember the day that I visited my grandmother in the nursing home, and she was screaming my name because she had reverted back to Yiddish because she could no longer speak English anymore because of the disease. And I was in so much pain. Again, this wasn't like, oh, this was when Rabbi was secular, so he probably wasn't religious. This was 7 years ago. I was already a rabbi, I already had a beard and a big kippah on, right? And my grandmother was calling my name because the orderlies asked me to leave because they were bathing her. And the one thing that, or one of the many things that those that are Alzheimer's patients do not like, they don't like people touching them, and they don't like things being moved around in their room. And these were these strangers, and she thought that they were hurting her. So she was screaming my name in Yiddish, David, David, come, help me, they're hurting me, they're hurting me. And I was crying with tears streaming down my face. And I screamed at God. I screamed at God 7 years ago. You know what I screamed at God? I said the words in Hebrew, Zu Torah v'zu schara. In Hebrew were the same words that the angels screamed at God when God destroyed the temple. When God destroyed the temple, so the angels screamed at God and said, this is what you do to the people. These are the people that gave their lives for you. They live for you and they die for you. And this is what you do, even the angels. You see how great this question is, girls? That even the angels could not understand. We, in this small class on Zoom, are trying to figure out why good things happen to bad people. The angels themselves don't know the answer to this question. So God says to the angels, I would have to destroy the entire world, mitov avohu, from the beginning of time, for you to have any conception of why I do the things we do. Right? So it's even presumptuous for any person to ever say, I know the reason why bad things happen to good people. Nobody knows why bad things happen to good people. But yet we trust, and we say that God is our God in heaven, and that pain that I had for the loss of my grandmother was very angry for a very long time. But that anger, thankfully, over the years turned into gratitude. Why? Because God gifted me a grandmother for 30 years of my life. And she was there for me when my mother couldn't be. And she raised me. She showed me love, support, devotion, everything I needed to grow into the person that you see in front of you today. So even though I may not understand, and I still, ladies, to this day, do not understand why she had to suffer the way that she did, but I'm grateful to God that he gave me this beautiful gift of the most wonderful woman that changed my life. You understand? So all of this comes down to, if we could kind of like boil everything of today's class into one simple thing, is being, not having, it's that saying that, so try again, that it's okay to admit that we don't have full control. And that's really what it comes down to. That doesn't mean that we should just throw our lives to the wind, obviously. We should continue to do our due diligence, study hard, get into good colleges, get good grades, get good jobs, marry good guys, get married, have good families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But realize that we cannot type out our life exactly the way that we want to. And we trust that any small thing that happens in life, whether it's as simple as the Gemara says, even a blade of grass that is bent has been predestined by God to do so. No matter how big or how small, the Isurim, those little inconveniences, whether they're small or, God forbid, very, very big things that are tragic that are happening in our lives, that there's rhyme and there's reason. And somehow, some way, it will be to our benefit. And it's impossible to figure out. Sometimes we won't figure it out today, not tomorrow, not 20. Maybe we'll have to wait until we're gone to be able to understand. But it's okay to say, I don't know, and I don't understand. That's okay. And even the rabbi struggles with these things sometimes. Like I said, I'm just like you, and I struggle with these things sometimes also. That's why I say everybody, and this is going to surprise you to hear me say this because I'm an Orthodox rabbi, everybody is slightly agnostic. Not atheist, but agnostic. Because every once in a while we doubt. We're human beings. I'm a human being. So we go through life and we doubt, is God really listening? Is God this? Is that it? How could God do this to me? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. We all doubt, right? But it doesn't make us bad Jews. It just makes us human. We're human beings. It's okay to not be perfect, right? I'll just end off by saying, because I'm a therapist, I take issue with therapists who try to create the perfect marriage. You know, if you follow this, and if you follow this, and if you follow this, you're never going to argue with your spouse. You're going to have a perfect relationship. I think it's a bunch of BS, to be honest with you. I think it's garbage, right? You know what I tell my wife? I go, Tova, you and I, we are just so screwed up. I just want to be screwed up with you forever. That's what I want. I said, we're not perfect. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to say things that I don't mean, and I need to work on it. It's not an excuse, right? And you're going to say things that maybe you don't mean. You're going to have a tough day, and you're going to take it out on me one evening, and that's cool. And I love you, right? And that's all right that we make mistakes. I just want to make mistakes with you for the rest of my life. That's what I want. That's a great microcosm of life, ladies. You're not going to live a perfect life, and neither am I. None of us are going to live perfect lives. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. Good things are going to happen to us. Bad things are going to happen to us, right? But at the end of the day, right, there's a famous psalm in Tehillim, in the Psalms. King David wrote this, right? Coolio was a rapper in the 90s, right? For those of you who remember the 90s. Coolio was a rapper in the 90s, and he said in one of his rap songs, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left, right? He didn't make that up. It was actually a psalm from King David. And King David wrote the psalm. It was probably one of the most famous psalms in all of Tehillim. And it says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for God is with me. That's the famous psalm. You can look it up. Now, this is very mistranslated. It does not mean, people think, well, if I'm a good Jewish boy, if I'm a good Jewish girl, and I do all the mitzvot, and I listen to the Torah, bad things won't happen to me, right? Wrong. Very, very wrong. That's not what the psalm says. Listen to what it says. Though is a funny word in English. It does not mean if bad things happen to me. It means when. Gam ki elech b'geit salmavis. When bad things happen to me, when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because at some point in our lives, we all walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Gam ki elech b'geit salmavis, lo ira ra. I won't fear, because I know God is with me. So what really is the difference between religious people and non-religious people? Does it mean that religious people don't have these problems, religious people do, or vice versa? Of course not. Everybody has the same problems. But what's the difference? Those that have a religious personality, those that see God as part of their lives, they don't freak out because they know that God is with them. And they know that there's a purpose and a rhyme and a reason. So I feel bad when I hear about people who don't believe in God or don't trust God because they don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. They don't see, they just say life sucks, period. And that's it. And we're all a bunch of worms and ants, and our life has very, very little meaning, and there's no purpose to our suffering. So there's no purpose to it, then my life is more or less meaningless. So when a person has a religious mindset, I don't necessarily mean Shabbos and kosher, although those things are wonderful, of course, as well. But when a person has this unbelievably deep understanding of Gam ki elech b'geit salmavis, that I know that God is with me during my difficult times, that there's purpose, rhyme, and reason to my suffering, then the suffering is easier to take, right? That's why, by the way, when a person, God forbid, you should know from such things, but when a person passes away, you know what we say every single time? Baruch daina emet, blessed be the true judge. You know, when a person passes away, the mourners, they say something called Kaddish. You know what Kaddish is? It's that prayer we say in the synagogue, right? Did you know Kaddish says nothing about dead people? It's a big misconception. People think Kaddish is about, we're going to help the soul to ascend to heaven. It's not true. Kaddish is not for the dead person. Kaddish is for you. Did you know that? Kaddish is for you. It's for the mourner. Why? Because a mourner who just lost somebody, if he gets up in synagogue every single day, 3 times a day, and says, I don't understand why God took this loved one from me, but I trust God that he knows what he's doing. There is a rhyme. There is a reason. There is this. There is that, right? If you say that enough times, 3 times a day for a year, you know what happens? You begin to feel a little bit better, right? Not that we forget about the person who loved us, obviously, but it brings us a certain sense of comfort that we know that there's a rhyme and a reason to why we suffer. So that is the ultimate answer of why bad things happen to good people. No, we don't have a specific answer, but we have to trust Gam Zilutova, that God knows what he's doing, and that's why he's God and you're not, right? The great Rav Noach Weinberg of blessed memory, Rosh Shiva of Esha Torah, once said, he said, I'm happy that I don't know everything that God does, because then God would be as smart as me, and I'm not very smart. The fact that God does things that you don't know means that you're just not smart, and we're not on that level. We're not on that level to understand every single thing that happens, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to strive to find understanding and meaning in our lives. And that's why you have, ladies, people like Chai Sarah and myself, who are, when you are going through a challenge, we're not there to give you answers to why you're suffering, but to help provide you with comfort, to help you through those challenging times, which is a very big difference. We're not telling you why you should feel the way you feel, but we're trying to bring you comfort, to bring you through that period, to make it easier for you and easier for you to comprehend and to go through. And that's why we're here as rabbis and educators for. So just to end off, I want to give you two a blessing. I apologize if I rambled on too long, but I always like to end off my lectures with a blessing, to bless you both, to find incredible meaning in your life, right? That bad things unfortunately happen to all of us, me included, but that you will find comfort in the challenges that you have, and may Hashem bless you, that all the challenge that will come your way, that you will gain tremendous strength from, and will only cause you to be a stronger and greater individual, better wives, better mommies, and better future leaders of the Jewish people.
Amen. Can I share something quick?
And thank you.
That's it. What?
Can I share something quick?
You may share away. This is your call.
First of all, these ideas were absolutely incredible. I see how Debbie's sitting there typing it up. Right, Debbie? You're really enjoying it? I'm so grateful because
there were a lot of.
What do you want to say, Debbie?
Sorry, I just want to say there were a lot of inspiring things here I took in mind to pass them over.
Go for it.
I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Tell us. We want to hear. Tell us what you want to pass over.
Okay, so before Debbie tells, Chai, you had a question. What did you add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one very quick thing that I shared on my video, but I wanted to share it. You can tell it to your family. It's really incredible. Basically, what happened was my school was going on a 10-day trip. They were going on a birthright trip. They said, Chai Sarah, all the people that were going canceled. So can you please come? And we're so excited. And I was like, oh my gosh, a 10-day trip on birthright. What could be better? So Wednesday, I was told about they're leaving on Friday morning. Thursday, I went to a party. And at this party, everything was, everyone was very, very careful. Whatever it was, somebody there got the big C. I was standing next to that person. So I had to be tested. Now, Thursday morning, I'm running around trying to find a place, calling, no one's answering. I'm like, I need to find out. Because if I'm going on this trip, I need to pack for 10 days. If I'm not going to make Shabbos plans and I have so much I need to do, I couldn't get through the principal. I couldn't get through the COVID place. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I kept calling people. I'm like, just tell me, am I going or am I not? Because if I'm not coming, no problem. Just let me know because I need to prepare. I couldn't get through to the principal, couldn't get through to any COVID test. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. And in the middle of the day, the secretary tells me, oh, they're probably going to get somebody else because you couldn't get through to the COVID test, whatever it is. I'm like, okay, so am I not going? Because I just need to know. Ends up that they end up going. Sunday night, we find out that the person who was at the party, they had been tested positive, which means if I would have gone on this trip, the whole school would have been affected. They would have gotten hysterical because it would quickly put me into quarantine. They have to call someone from Yerushalayim to come running to the school. It would have been chaos because my school is so into COVID. I can't even tell you how into it they are. Everyone's wearing masks and they're saying for a joke, they're like, the kids, they're so into the plastic that they said, like, for a joke, if they would give the girls a vaccine, they'll give them plastic. Girls would just be eating plastic to, like, help them pull through the COVID because they're so into it. And then I just found out now that I'm positive. So I would have been on the trip, found out that I'm positive, would have destroyed the trip, probably have to stop in the middle. And I'm just saying that I'm so grateful to God that He literally saved me. And He said, don't get through to the principal because you got through the trip. I told you where to go get the COVID test, and you would have gone. So that's why you couldn't get through there.
Remember what I said last time? Remember I said that, again, that famous quote from Rebbe, from Rav Scheinberg Zatzal, said it all depends on the prescription of your glasses, right? So girls, like I these are not just special stories that Chai Sarah and I are sharing. I'm sure every one of you has stories just like this, right? But the question is, do we write them off as, well, we just got lucky that day, or this was something special, something unique, something special happened to me that day. So gotta always remember, as the rabbi always said, it all depends on your prescription, on your glasses, how you view your life, how you view the good, both the good and the bad, right? And the perception that you have. You cannot change the reality around you. You can only change your perception to that reality. So that's very important.
Wow.
Any more questions from Debbie or Samantha?
Debbie, go.
I just wanted to say thank you. It was very inspiring.
Okay, My pleasure. I have actually, my son has hockey practice tonight. Thank God we're out of quarantine tonight. So my son is going to hockey practice. He's got a big tryout tonight, so I hope that he's going to do well. I'm going out with my wife tonight, so that's exciting. Wishing you all tremendous blessings of success. Hi, Sarah, feel free to give my information to either Samantha or Debbie or whoever if they have any questions. They want to talk to me about anything.
Yeah.
And I will see you guys another time.
Could you bring your daughter next time so she can we can meet your daughter and let's hear some fun stuff from
yeah,
her?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell Sylvia. Sylvia's in school now. In school, I mean, she's on Zoom. She's on school Zoom now. But I'll bring her by the call next time.
Yay! Thank you
Okay.
so much for your
Pleasure
time.
meeting you, girls. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wait, guys. Wait. Hold on.
Sarah, I want to say